who are the players that are still out there on waivers that you could potentially put in a lineup in place of some of those stars who you know are going to sit. Let's find out. Welcome back, Endgame community. I'm Pierre. One more time to help you with waiver wire pickups for the 2022 season. You're still playing, or you just want to know who you think is going to go off in the final week of the season? Well, I'm going to do my best to help you with some waiver wire pickups that should be available in a lot of leagues. First up, as we do always, let's talk about the injury news. Not a lot of big names got hurt last week, which is a good thing. But look, you know these teams want to keep their players fresh for the postseason. These guys, well, they don't have to worry about it because the Arizona Cardinals are not going to the postseason. James Conner is out with a shin injury, left that game. And look, he's a guy that you've been riding all season long. He's been really solid. One of the few workhorse backs you could count on. You cannot count on him in Week 18 because even if he does play, you're not going to even want to pick up his replacement, which would be Keontae Ingram, probably. They're on the road against San Francisco. Not a good spot. So Connor, don't know if he'll play, and even if he does, don't think I would trust him anyways. And then Jacoby Myers, a receiver for the Patriots, who had just been coming back to relevance, putting up some points the last couple of weeks, but he has a shoulder injury now bothering him. He's missed some time already this season. Patriots do need to win in the final week, so you think he'd give it a go if he can, but definitely keep an eye on that. A player that might be interesting, definitely now on the radar, is rookie receiver Tyquan Thornton, who did catch a touchdown also in this past week's game. And look, I mean, it's not a good spot for him either. They're going on the road to Buffalo, so I wouldn't be eager to fire up any Patriots receiver really. But Thornton in deep leagues or those who just are desperate might be a guy you could stream. And then the quarterbacks just keep dropping like flies. The latest was the backup to Tua Tagovailoa, and that was Teddy Bridgewater. That game was tied, and then Teddy, well, he, I think, broke a finger because the hand got hit on a helmet from a Patriots defender. Didn't return to the game, and it sounds like he is already ruled out for the rest of this season. So the Dolphins' playoff hopes are not looking good because it's Skylar Thompson, the rookie, the late-round draft pick, who is going to be starting for the Dolphins. And they still are going to do everything they can to try to reach the postseason, but you've got to be worried about that receiving core, which has been so amazing all season long. And then finally, thankfully, kind of mercifully, Nick Foles was injured and had to leave the game. Probably shouldn't have been starting that game, but he's out. Sam Ehlinger back in, and probably he'll be the guy who gets to put an end to this season, if you can call it that, of the Colts in Week 18. All right, now let's get to the top waiver wire pickups I'm looking at for Week 18 of the fantasy season. Now, you want to focus on players that, you know, obviously you're going to get touches, right? Targets at the receiver, tight end position, those carries, and also targets out of the backfield. In Week 18, it's so crazy because you don't know which teams are going to roll out their regulars, which teams are going to rest players. You have a lot of teams that have nothing to play for, either because they've been eliminated from the postseason, or sometimes these top teams will rest players. They'll put them in, they'll only play a little bit. It's very tricky. I'm looking at these players that are going to have big roles in games that definitely matter. So let's start with the Saturday slate. There's going to be 2 games now, we know, on Saturday. And the one that matters most is for the division. That is going to be the Titans and the Jaguars. So I'm going to look at a player like Treylon Burks, who is the number 1 receiver in Tennessee. Now, here's the thing. It's very tricky here because Tennessee, you know, is without their starting quarterback. Part of the reason why they just keep losing. Not the only reason, granted. The Titans kind of pull a fast one on us last week because we thought we were going to see Malik Willis again. And out of nowhere, we see a guy who hadn't even been on the team until Tannehill got hurt. And that was Joshua Dobbs, a guy who's a longtime backup, well, 3rd string quarterback for the Steelers. And now all of a sudden found his way onto the Titans. And they rolled him out there. And you know what? They didn't get the win, but he at least kept them competitive. And he looked better than Malik Willis. And there's a good chance we see him again in Week 18 because Willis just does not look ready for prime time. Dobbs at least has some experience, won't make as many mistakes. He did have a couple of bad turnovers, but still he kept them close. So I think that Burks is going to be a guy who benefits from having a quarterback who can actually get the ball out in his area. Now, you might wonder about the Jags defense because, of course, They just held their opponent to 3 points. That's because it was the Texans. Don't be fooled. If you look at the past month, it looks like the Jags have been great against wide receivers, shutting them down, right? But it's always about the schedule. Look who they played over the last 4 games. They just played the Texans, and before that they played the Jets with Zach Wilson. And then, before that, they had played the Titans, and that was without Treylon Burks. Okay, and this Titans receiving core, without Treylon Burks, is not much. Now, Robert Woods did get a fair amount of targets with Dobbs. I think he's kind of a sneaky, deep sleeper, but if Burks is out there, he's definitely a guy you want to target. He's such a great athlete. You've seen some of the things he did, especially that highlight catch he had last week. He's the number 1 here. He's a playmaker, and he's going to get a ton of targets, I feel, in this game. Jags are not a shutdown defense by any means. They will let these big-name receivers, CeeDee Lamb just feasted on them a few weeks ago. They let some of the other receivers have big games. Burks may not go off, but I feel like he's a guy you could definitely put in as a wide receiver 3, given the circumstances of Week 18. Now, a receiver I really like on the other side of this matchup is Zay Jones. Now, Zay Jones has been disappointing lately. If you did happen to put him in a fantasy lineup any of the last couple of weeks, you were left very disappointed. Like, even Christian Kirk hasn't done anything. If you look at this past week, he only got you 34 yards. But again, Kirk did nothing. Evan Engram, who had been going off, did nothing because they really did not need to pass. And they finally actually didn't pass a lot because they could just run against Houston. It was a 31-3 route, okay? So finally, the volume wasn't there because Jags had no reason to really press as far as the passing offense. Well, I don't know how much they'll need to pass against the Titans. It's not like Titans are a big scoring team here, but I think they'll go back to their usual MO, and that is more pass than run. Zay Jones is a guy who has been getting a ton of targets. He's been more valuable in fantasy than Christian Kirk lately. But here's the other thing. Given the matchup, their Titans defense here is the definition of a pass funnel defense. They right now are tied for second best in terms of fantasy points allowed to the running game, and they are dead last in terms of points allowed to wide receivers. 32nd, that's right. So you have a wide receiver, you want to play them against the Titans if you get a chance. Look, I know Marvin Jones was the lead receiver last week against the Texans. I'm not worried about Marvin Jones. I prefer the guy who's had that connection with Trevor Lawrence all year long, has had some monster games, and that is Zay Jones. All right, now here's just the perfect Week 18, final week. Why not try roll him out there pick? It's Kadarius Toney, who I really have wanted no part of this whole season if possible, because you just don't know what you're getting with him. He's barely ever healthy, and then the target share, who knows? Okay, but it's Week 18. Anything goes. Let's go with Toney, and here's why. Well, first of all, he actually was the most productive receiver for the Chiefs this past week at 71 yards. Not a ton of targets. I think he only had 4 catches, but he is also one of those guys who doesn't need a ton of volume. You know what he can do with the ball in his hands. So he's a guy who at least has been involved, and he did score a touchdown the week before. Didn't do anything yardage-wise, but look, at least he's doing something is the point here. But also, if you look at who's going to get used by the Chiefs in Week 18, Sky Moore actually also got hurt this past week, had a hand injury. Don't know if he'll be good to go. And you've got to think, in a game against the Raiders, where the Chiefs really don't have to go full throttle here, maybe they do scale it back. Maybe Kelsey doesn't run as many routes, right? Doesn't see the field as often. Maybe Juju and guys like that. Maybe a guy like Toney gets more involved because they want to get him going for the postseason, so he's another weapon that they have to throw out there. Toney's a guy that is the ultimate boom bust because he can definitely make some big plays, but he can also get you nothing. You know what? In Week 18, why not? And then one more Saturday special. Let's talk about the quarterback for the Raiders who's going against the Chiefs, and it's Jarrett Stidham. I dare say one of the biggest surprises, maybe the biggest surprise of this past week, was the fact that the backup quarterback for the Raiders went for 365 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, look, this is not going to, lead us into some sort of discussion about Derek Carr in any way. I don't really care about that. Who's going to help you in Week 18? It looks like Jarrett Stidham could, because he just put up some numbers against the Niners, which were supposed to be the best defense in the NFL. Now he gets the Chiefs, which you probably know, not the best defense in the NFL. They're, in fact, one of the most generous to quarterbacks. They give up a ton of passing yards because they put up points. They force the other team to pass. I mean, it almost sounds too good to be true if you're looking at Stidham putting up another 300-plus yard game, but everything is in place here. Not sure that Jarrett Stidham is the next coming of Tom Brady or anything like that, but the volume will be there. The opportunity is there. The matchup is there. You need to stream a quarterback. There's so many quarterbacks that are hurt these days. Some quarterbacks, you just don't know if you can trust this coming week. Kirk Cousins. So I think that Stidham is a decent streamer. I'm not going to say that he's a guy I have to start, but I mean, in this coming week, you're looking for a guy with some ceiling. Stidham might be your guy. And then one more in the I can't believe I'm recommending this guy category. There's Zach Moss of the Colts, now lead running back and apparently workhorse running back for the Colts. I really had to see it to believe it, and not just once or twice, but now we've had 3 times in a row where it's been basically all Moss in the backfield. Deion Jackson, I guess, is too good to see the field for this team. Look, so the last 3 games, Zach Moss has run for 220 yards. He's averaging 4.3 yards per carry, which is a lot better than what he did last year in Buffalo, which was 3.6 yards per carry. I mean, he's been pretty effective. He's getting the volume. The only thing he's really not getting is touchdowns. And by that, I mean he hasn't scored a single touchdown all season. And he plays for the Colts. But here's the thing. Zach Moss gets the Texans in Week 18. Again, that means absolutely nothing for either of them except for, of course, draft slot. But Zach Moss could very well score a touchdown, his first of the season, because the Texans have allowed the most touchdowns to running backs out of any team. That's 21. All right, so there's a really good chance he finally breaks the streak. Zach Moss, I mean, you prefer him in standard. He doesn't give you the highest ceiling in a PPR league. But again, you're looking for a guy you know will get touches and has a great matchup. It's Moss. And then what about a tight end who you can stream, somebody you can still pluck off waivers and put in for somebody you just don't have enough trust in? Let's go to Mike Gesicki for the first time in a long time, maybe all season. So Mike Gesicki, yeah, he did score a touchdown this last week. Touchdowns happen. There's plenty of touchdowns that go to Detroit random tight ends that you can't name. But here's why I kind of like Mike Gesicki next week. Because the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, Skylar Thompson is going to be the quarterback for the Dolphins. Not good for the Dolphins. But what happens when rookie quarterbacks or young, inexperienced, or not very strong arm quarterbacks get in the game? They throw it short. They favor dump offs to the running back and to the tight end. That's exactly what happened in this game against the Patriots. Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson were catching more passes than Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. I know, sorry to remind you. I got plenty of Jalen Waddle on my teams too, trust me. Mike Gesicki actually scored and got some targets, which never happened before. Okay, so I think Gesicki will get his share of targets. Remember, even before Gesicki had that touchdown, he was targeted before that in the end zone. He went repeatedly to him. He's a guy he's going to look for. And the matchup against the Jets, you know what the Jets do. They completely eliminate wide receivers. I don't know if they're going to completely eliminate Ty Hill and Jalen Waddle, but you know there's going to be some room for Gesicki to get targets because they're going to do their best to make sure that Hill and Waddle don't go off. So Gesicki, again, not a crazy high ceiling here, but you're looking for a touchdown from a tight end streamer. I kind of like Gesicki. And then finally, it wouldn't be a final week of the fantasy football season. What the hell flex if I didn't mention Taysom Hill. And it's not just because he's the ultimate, lotto ticket, but Taysom Hill has actually been doing some things the last couple of weeks. The Saints don't know what they're doing, but I do know that they somehow beat the Eagles in Philadelphia this past week. I think that's more about the Eagles and Gardner Minshew than anything. But on the Saints side, what are they doing? They're mixing it up. They're not letting Andy Dalton throw the ball too much. They're putting Taysom Hill at quarterback a little bit. He did some things as far as that, passing. He only passed a couple of times, but he did Taysom Hill things by running, and he got 46 yards and a touchdown on the ground. Also caught a pass, also threw a pass that was completed. But look, altogether, Taysom Hill can get you some points. You're looking for a streamer at tight end, maybe even quarterback. I mean, who knows? By this time, next week, Taysom Hill could have been the starting quarterback for New Orleans in Week 18. Taysom Hill is a guy that if you are desperate and you're looking for some points, I don't see that there's any way he's not going to put up some points next week. It's Carolina, who's now been eliminated from the playoffs. They have been good on defense, but they got nothing to play for anymore at this point. Taysom Hill, it's week 18. Why not? All right, those are my waiver wire picks for week 18 of the season. Good luck in the finals, everybody. And don't forget, we're with you the rest of the way. We got you covered with Start Sit as usual for everyone who is playing for the championship. Check out our playlist right here with all the advice that you could need.